Welcome. This is a study of the puzzle-based dating simulator HuniePop through the lens of Al-Quran. Specifically, I employed Seyyed Hossein Nasr's 2015 translation and commentary, Study Quran, edited by Dagli et al. I have cross-referenced this translation with Maulana Wahiduddin Khan and Professor Farida Khanum's translation published in 2009 by Good Word Books. For surahs, or chapters that were particularly significant to my work, I consulted lectures from Sheikh Hamza Yusuf and Sheikh Asim al-Hakim for greater insight. At this point in the introduction, you might be thinking, I can't wait to hear this punchline. In the description, you'll find a complete bibliography of the resources I consulted. If you disagree with my interpretations of the Quran or would like to provide additional context not in this video, on screen now is the widely accepted citation format so that we are all on even footing, and my email is available on my YouTube channel for academic correspondence. HuniePop is a puzzle-based dating simulator, though most know it better for its drawn pornography of the women and other beings with whom you become romantically engaged during its story. The main character is guided by a self-described love fairy who pushes them to approach and begin relations with women in the local community. By succeeding in matching puzzles as representative of dates, as well as showing some basic interpersonal skills, eventually the player participates in a locum tenens of sex with their chosen partner. The result? The main character receives an erotic image to which they may J.O. if so inclined. So what is the goal of this commentary? As you can imagine, it's taken me a while to research, and it has been through quite a few permutations. I first thought to plot a course through HuniePop that could remain within the bounds of the teachings of Allah through Muhammad ﷺ as revealed in the Quran. Let me be the first to say that this is not possible with an honest reading of the Quran. The singular issue at the heart of that impossibility is, unsurprisingly, fornication. Zina, usually translated as fornication and adultery, or simply fornication, is mentioned numerous times in the Quran. Zina is unequivocally a sin. For example, to quote the 23rd surah, The Believers, "Truly, the believers have prospered, who are humble in their prayers, and who turn away from idle talk, and who give the alms, and who guard their private parts, save from their spouses, or those whom their right hands possess." Needless to say, none of the women in HuniePop will become our wife, nor our servant. I state surely that we cannot avoid zina if we wish to play HuniePop as intended, by which I mean achieving the narrative end state and unlocking alpha mode. If I was a lesser creator, not interested in the theological implications of HuniePop, I would say that one should simply not engage in the lewd aspects of the game, or perhaps install a mod which erases them. That would be very lazy indeed, and not worth the dozens of hours I have spent researching this topic. You see, the Quran dictates in Surah 57, titled Iron, that Allah is the first and the last, and the outward and the inward, and He is knower of all things. He is with you wheresoever you are, and Allah sees whatsoever you do. The soul of HuniePop is unequivocally the draw of seeing animated breasts. To remove enough from the game that this no longer applies is to, in my opinion, create a different product entirely. Therefore, HuniePop's main narrative end state requires fornication with upwards of 9 women and more than one as yet undefined entity. Just as one cannot live an infallible sin-free life, see chapter 39 verse 53, one cannot play HuniePop and remain completely pure. Instead, a much more important and profound inquiry is the extent of the forgiveness which the HuniePop protagonist must ask for, or indeed avoid asking for, while still completing the win condition. This endeavor will encourage an open mind to the struggles of existing in HuniePop's world under the Prophet's revelations, ﷺ, while quite topically encouraging an open-hearted reading of the Quran, not simply pulling from its pages those ayat, or verses, which are prohibitive. As the Quran dictates in chapter 53, verse 32, "Those who shun grave sins and indecencies, save what is slight, truly your Lord is of vast forgiveness. He knows you best, from when He brought you forth from the earth, and when you were hidden in your mother's bellies. So deem not yourselves purified. He knows best, the reverent." The astute members of my audience will have already noticed my quite pointed omission of the Hadith. the sayings or accounts which accompany the Quran in different forms, depending on the Islamic canon being followed. The reason I have omitted a reading of the Ahadith is on historical grounds. The Quran is accepted to be a revealed text translated from the perceived original Arabic, though as Joseph Lombard points out, the vast majority of Muslims do not believe that the Quran's language is of this world. I cannot in good faith employ a hadith with the same conviction as a verse from the Quran. Even the most sahih hadith is a retelling of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ actions from a companion's memory, among which the earliest were written around 100 to 135 years after his passing. That being said, if there is an ayah which is heavily clarified by a related hadith, I will be forced to accept that clarification. If you are interested in the accounts of the Prophet's companions, or indeed the tazir punishments recommended for our acts in HuniePop, an all-in-one hadith is provided in the description below. Without further ado, let's begin our journey into the realm of HuniePop. Unfortunately, the game does begin with our main character inside of a bar and lounge, and it won't be the last time we are forced into tempting surroundings. It should be no surprise that of all the locations where we may seek women, the mosque is not one. While the Quran only explicitly bans the consumption of wine by name, supporting revelations absolutely point to a prohibition of alcohol and narcotics in general, such as in Al-Nisa, verse 43, "O you who believe, draw not unto prayer when you are drunken, until you know what you are uttering." However, I do not find a convincing argument as to why stepping foot in a bar would be haram in itself. In fact, as the act of drinking is certainly haram, then the temptation of drink no doubt sets the believer in a state of jihad, of struggle. And where is that jihad greater than in the den of sin itself?
I have this inclination, but I resist. I'm in jihad. I am rewarded. Allah Azza wa Jal will give me great rewards because I am suppressing this evil feeling of shaitan.
At the bar, we meet a woman we later know as Kiyu. As instructed in Al-Nur, verse 30, we lower our gaze and remain chaste. We pick only answers that maintain our purity, and soon the interaction ends.
I can see how uncomfortable you are right now from space.
Only the next morning do we encounter Kiyu again, this time in its true form. Here we have a theologically significant question to answer. What kind of being is Kiyu? She claims to be a fairy, something which the Quran does not mention, and indeed, we have no reason to believe exists. During the course of HuniePop, Kiyu will claim to have a catalog of magical powers and properties, none of which we are able to test in a controlled environment. The Quran does mention the jinn, psychic beings created from scorching fire, which are capable of hearing the word of the Quran as told in Surah 72, Al-Jinn. Like Kiyu, these beings purport to be invisible unless they choose to be seen. Beyond this bare coincidence, there is very little evidence from Kiyu's presentation to say that she is a jinn. I find it much more likely that Kiyu is a sorceress or other style of very earthly illusionist and con artist, not unlike those in the tale of Moses, ﷺ. But I don't want to sidestep the question I'm sure you all are pondering. If Kiyu is a jinn or other non-human being, is it zina, or just indecent, to engage in a relationship with her when we have assigned her no bride sum? This question, I think, would be a distinct misunderstanding of sin within the text of the Quran. Consider the following verse from Surah 33. "And as for whomsoever thou mightest desire, of those whom thou hast set aside, there is no blame upon thee. Thus is it likelier that they will be comforted, that they will not grieve, and that they will be content with that which thou hast given all of them. God knows what is in your hearts, and God is knowing, clement." It would be dishonest to say that our acts and the technicality of our circumstance will weigh greatly in the measure of sinfulness. If we pursue Kiyu to fornicate because it is her human figure that draws us in, and we must to finish the game, the fornication will be zina regardless, as God knows what is in your hearts. To avoid repetition later on, I will say that the same is true for a secret companion who claims to be an extraterrestrial, given that she is a secret companion, and therefore we can reach an end state of HuniePop without accessing her. I say we do so. Q introduces us to the rules of HuniePop and the tools we will use to conquer it. I don't think I have to provide a citation to explain why we will not be purchasing any gifts that are sexually explicit or narcotics related, and we will avoid purchasing food that is not confirmed halal. These guidelines will significantly constrain our ability to progress and earn high amounts of honey, thus increasing the weight of our jihad, especially at the very end. The main character improves themselves by investing honey earned from gift giving into different traits. In selecting which traits to invest in, let us not forget verse 90 from Surah 5. O you who believe, wine and gambling and idols and divining arrows are but a means of defilement of Satan's doing. So avoid it, that haply you may prosper. Of the traits available, luck explicitly contains a level of gambling, and given that each level is represented by an accessory item, it will not do to purchase these traits. Unfortunately, the same goes for the trait of sexuality, the first level of which would obtain you candles made for sinful purpose, and the final level of romance, which is a bottle of wine. Each woman has a preferred trait, so those that hold sexuality above all others will be difficult to pursue. The good news is that gift giving is a necessity for progression. The act of charitable giving is extolled multiple times within the Prophet's ﷺ revelations. We should endeavor to keep as little money as possible with us, because the main character has no use for it other than giving. The core of HuniePop's content is pursuing the main cast of women through conversation and dating. As mentioned before, the end of these pursuits will always be fornication, but that does not mean that our method of pursuit should not be examined and in line with the word. Each date that you go on will be more difficult than the last, and as each relationship progresses, it becomes extremely difficult to succeed in dates unless you are fully invested in a woman's preferred trait. My strategy is to level up the passion trait as a priority because it will increase the amount of affection gained across the board. Given that I cannot level up sexuality at all, I leave the women who prefer that trait for last. By then, as in my real life, I can utilize a full arsenal of date gifts and affection bonuses to make up for my lack of sexual prowess. Aside from this central strategy, my main focus is conducting myself in line with the teachings of the Quran as much as possible. That means that I do not ask any questions about these women's bodies, even if it means repeating a previously answered question and disappointing my partner. Instead, I ask about their education, about their favorite things to do, their favorite places to be. In kind, these women will ask questions that we must answer. Some of these are obviously temptations to sin, in which case we pick the least sinful answer, no matter what our partner has to say about it. Some questions may be difficult to navigate, and you may find yourself wondering what the Quran would guide you to reply. For instance, you may be asked whether you believe extraterrestrials exist. Don't worry. Whether or not aliens exist, they do so in the light of Allah. The very second verse of the Quran uses the plural noun when naming Allah, Lord of the worlds. In the 65th surah titled Divorce, verse 12 states, God it is who created the 7 heavens, and from the earth the like thereof, referring to other heavenly bodies. As you progress in your relationships, the women of HuniePop send photographs to your honeybee, a combination cell phone, inventory system, and woman detector. Some of these photographs are arguably innocent, but soon you will be disappointed to find a lewd photograph in your inbox. I once again cite chapter 24 verse 30 and implore you to simply leave these pictures unopened as a metaphorical method to lower your gaze. Following my methods of safe gaming, I dated each woman to completion, struggling notably on Jessie and Aiko, who prefer sexuality above all else. I was able to perfect a date gift strategy which increased the number of moves and amount of passion I generated, finally converting all passion into affection. With much trial and error, I succeeded and was presented with the final challenge.
This is the one?
That's the guy.
How is that possible? I don't understand.
This woman claims to be a love goddess. As you no doubt see, this presents a distinct problem for our character. It may be the highest form of blasphemy a being could present to us, but I am going to argue that the context we later gain from Venus shows a misunderstanding on her end rather than ours. You see, Venus has a number of dialogue lines that give insight into her origins and life prior to meeting our character. When asked where she is from, Venus tells us about Sky Garden, and our honeybee notifies us that we've learned her home world. I think Venus misunderstands what humanity sees as God and employs the term simply because she is an extraterrestrial, mistranslating her own language. At one point, Venus will text the player, and she says, "Before I became a goddess, I used to dance at love clubs." Now, divinity is not something which Allah acquired. In the general introduction to the study Quran, Seyyed Hossein Nasr asks, what are the grand themes with which this sacred scripture deals? He answers, the Quran contains above all a doctrine about the nature of reality on all levels, from absolute reality itself, that is, the one God, to the reality of creation, both macrocosmic and microcosmic. It provides the full revelation of Allah, or God, as the supreme reality whose oneness is at the center of the Islamic message. God is one, at once impersonal and personal, transcendent and immanent, majestic and beautiful, beyond all that we can conceive and yet nearer to us than our jugular vein, as the Quran itself asserts so poetically. When I seek to study HuniePop through the eyes of the Quran, it means not that the revelations are alongside the text of the game, rather the game is contained within the context of the one God. Analyzing Venus made me realize that much more presently, and I believe now that perhaps I made a mistake of context. What occurs within HuniePop is an unsolvable problem for a man who seeks to follow the teachings of the Quran. The main character is bound to travel only to destinations where women draw his gauge. Bound, I would guess, by the influence of Q, the indomitable love fairy. When I realized what that means for the life of our protagonist, I began to realize the lines in which his discomfort with the scenario shine through. In his first conversation with Jessie, he seeks to end it by saying, "Let's get out of here." A proposition for sex? Or a plea to leave this den of sin? After our first sexual encounter, we say, "I can't believe that happened." Satisfaction or distress at our blasphemous faltering? And lastly, upon meeting Venus, once we've committed zina with the main cast of women, we tell her, "I'm just doing what Q told me to do." In the world of HuniePop, we don't have a choice whether or not to sin, only how to comport ourselves best while we suffer a world replete with sin. And is that not a telling metaphor for the world at large, for the human experience in general? Given that Allah constitutes absolute reality, perhaps the one question I have failed to ask is the only one worth answering. What does HuniePop exist to tell us about his creation? I implore you to meditate on that yourself. Maybe the answer lies within another secret character I have yet to speak about.
I'm Momo. I'm the kitty.
Perhaps not. Thank you for listening. This has been the B-Man, following in greater footsteps than my own.